Did anyone ever tell you that life after 80 doesn't feel like crossing a finish line, but more like stepping onto unfamiliar ground with no map in hand? You've spent decades learning, loving, building, adapting. And then, one quiet morning, something shifts. Not in a dramatic way, but in the subtle hush of a room that used to echo with voices. In the slower rhythm of your morning coffee. In how people speak to you, or don't. No one really prepares you for this part of life. Not the doctors, not the books, not even your closest friends. Maybe because it's hard to explain what it feels like when the world begins to soften its gaze on you. When invitations stop coming. When your memories speak louder than the conversations around you. When you start wondering, is this just me? Or does everything feel smaller? If you felt this quiet question in your bones, you're not alone. In today's video, we're pulling back the curtain on 5 profound realities that unfold once we cross into our 80s. These aren't the usual health stats or fitness tips. This isn't a list of medical checkups or mobility advice. This is something deeper, quieter, more personal. We're talking about the things most people don't say out loud. How your circle of connection begins to thin. How small physical slips now carry bigger consequences. How your presence in a room sometimes feels invisible. How your daily world quietly shrinks. And how even your own body starts surprising you in ways you never expected. These aren't meant to scare you. They're meant to acknowledge you. Because when truth is spoken aloud, it loses its power to isolate. And when we name the quiet struggles, we also give them shape, so we can walk through them with clarity, courage, and even grace. You might recognize some of these realities already. Maybe you've been sensing them in the background, like a song playing softly that you can't quite name. Or maybe they'll take you by surprise, opening your eyes to shifts you hadn't yet noticed. Either way, you deserve to know you're not going through this alone. That's why I invite you to stay with me until the end. Not just to hear these 5 truths, but to feel seen, validated, and empowered. Because there's something powerful about recognizing what's changing and realizing you still have the power to respond with wisdom, intention, and quiet strength. So let's begin this conversation with honesty, with heart, and with hope. Not because aging is easy, but because it is real and it is worth facing head on. And when we face it together, we don't just endure it, we rise through it. Let's begin. It doesn't happen all at once. One day your phone rings often. Birthdays, check-ins, dinner plans. Then slowly, almost without notice, the spaces between those calls start to stretch. The days grow quieter, the mail pile gets smaller, and conversations once filled with laughter become fewer, softer, sometimes replaced with only memory. This is the quiet erosion no one warns you about. How after 80, your social world begins to contract, not from choice, but from change. Friends move away or grow frail. Some pass on, leaving only echoes behind. Family visits become more occasional, squeezed between busy schedules and growing obligations. Even the neighbors you once knew well may no longer live next door, or may no longer remember your name. At first it seems manageable. After all, you've always been self-sufficient, maybe even a little private. But eventually the silence takes on a texture of its own. Not painful, but noticeable. You find yourself looking out the window more often, not for anything in particular, just for proof that the world is still turning. And here's the truth. This isn't loneliness in the way people think. It's not about needing to be surrounded by people all the time. It's about the subtle absence of rhythm, the loss of the little interactions that once gave your days their pulse. You might miss the random knock at the door, the spontaneous phone call, the smile from someone who remembers not just your name, but your story. What makes this shift so difficult is how quietly it arrives. No one tells you, this is the last time your friend will come by unannounced. No one marks the calendar when a relationship begins to fade, not out of neglect, but because life just moved on, without checking in with you first. But here's something important to hold on to. While the number of people around you may decrease, the depth of connection doesn't have to. Sometimes, one honest conversation can do more for the soul than a room full of noise. One person who really listens can make you feel more alive than 10 who are just passing time. And sometimes you become your own best companion, sitting with your memories, honoring the ones who shaped your life, and remembering that your story still matters. If this speaks to you, take a breath and know that you're not strange or weak for noticing it. You're simply human and very much still capable of forming meaningful bonds, even if they come in new ways. Through a phone screen, a letter, a smile exchanged during a morning walk. So don't retreat completely. Stay open, reach out, speak your truth when the moment invites it. Because when the crowd fades, a single voice that truly sees you becomes more valuable than gold. Let's move forward. It used to be that a small cold meant a few sneezes and a quiet day on the couch. A bruise faded like a passing cloud. A skipped meal was just a skipped meal. But somewhere along the journey, often right around your 80s, something changes. The little things don't stay little anymore. A sore throat now lingers like an unwelcome guest. A simple stumble leaves a mark that takes weeks, not days, to heal. A skipped glass of water can leave you feeling dizzy, drained, disoriented. It's not just that the body slows down, it's that the body's ability to bounce back quietly disappears. You used to recover without even noticing. Now recovery demands your full attention, your patience, your care, your presence. The margin for error has become thinner and the consequences louder. And yet, few talk about this part of aging. Even doctors often brush it off as normal. But you feel it. You sense the subtle betrayal, not of weakness, but of unpredictability. The body you've lived in all your life no longer plays by the same rules. You might still feel strong on the inside. In many ways you are, but strength now wears a different face. It's no longer about how fast you move, but how gently you respond when your body says, "Not today." And let's be honest, it's frustrating, especially if you've always been active, capable, the one others relied on. There's a strange grief in watching your resilience shift from something automatic to something you must now. Sometimes that answer is rest. Sometimes it's water. Sometimes it's permission to slow down, not out of defeat, but out of wisdom. Because healing at this age becomes a spiritual practice as much as a physical one. So if you've found yourself surprised by how long it takes to recover, you're not alone. If you've felt frustrated by how small things spiral into big ones, you're not weak. You're simply navigating a new phase of life where compassion toward yourself is no longer optional. It's essential. And that's not a step backward. That's grace. Let's keep going. There comes a time, often without warning, when you walk into a room and something feels different. Not in the air, not in the temperature, but in the way people look at you, or rather the way they don't. You're there, fully present, but it's as if the edges of you begin to blur. Your voice, once clear, certain, now waits a little longer to be heard. You speak and someone cuts in. Not out of rudeness, but out of assumption, assuming you were done or that your words weren't urgent. This is the quiet, slow fading of presence that so many older adults experience, but so few talk about. You used to command attention. Your stories lit up conversations. Your advice carried weight. But somewhere along the way, your age started walking into the room before your voice had a chance to. It's not always intentional. People aren't cruel. They're just distracted, rushed. And in a world obsessed with speed and youth, the wisdom that takes decades to form often gets left waiting in silence. You start noticing little things. Waiting longer for someone to respond when you speak. Being talked over during family dinners. Feeling invisible in group settings. At church, in waiting rooms. At the store. It's not just being ignored, it's being unseen. And that carries a quiet kind of grief. One that doesn't scream, but simmers. A grief not for what is lost physically, but for what is being overlooked emotionally. You've lived, you've built, you've endured. But in this culture, sometimes experience is treated like background noise instead of front page news. And yet, there is something profoundly powerful in recognizing this shift for what it is. Because when you name the feeling of invisibility, you reclaim the truth of your presence. You remember your voice still holds value, your insight still carries weight, and the world, even if it forgets, is still better because you're in it. The key now isn't to shout louder, it's to speak clearer, to share when someone's truly listening, and to pour your energy not into being seen by everyone, but into being truly known by someone. Because while many may overlook you, there will always be a few, perhaps just one or two, who lean in closer, who hear not just your words but your pauses, who see not just your age but your legacy. To them, you are not invisible, you are unforgettable. So don't shrink to fit the world's inattentiveness. Don't hand over your story to silence. Speak, smile, interrupt if you must. You are not done, and your presence still changes the room. Let's continue forward. It doesn't happen with fanfare. There's no announcement, no final moment that tells you your world is changing shape. But slowly, like the tide retreating from the shore, your daily life begins to pull back. Errands that used to be quick and routine now feel like small expeditions. The grocery store feels louder. The sidewalks feel longer. Even getting dressed for the day starts to feel more like preparation than habit. The routes you once knew like the back of your hand, the post office, your favorite park bench, the corner cafe, they're still there. But somehow, they feel farther away. This isn't about fear, it's about energy. How much it takes to do what once felt effortless, how much rest you need afterward, and how often you quietly decide, maybe tomorrow. You don't stop living, but you start choosing more carefully where to spend your time. And in that process, the world outside your door quietly shrinks. It's not just places, it's people too. The neighbor who used to wave every morning has moved. The friend you used to meet for lunch is now too ill to drive. The club you once belonged to now meets without you. At first, it all feels manageable. A little less hustle, a little more stillness. But over time, the silence stretches. And even the fiercest independent soul may find themselves missing the background noise of life. The unplanned moments, the familiar faces, the rhythm of motion. Here's the thing no one tells you. The shrinking of your outer world can feel a lot like grief. Not the loud, aching kind, but the quiet kind that shows up in the form of missing what once was, without knowing exactly when it disappeared. You look around and realize your calendar has more empty spaces than it used to. And sometimes it's not just the spaces on the page that feel empty. But this truth doesn't have to be the end of the story. Because while the outside world may contract, your inner world can deepen. Now is the time for slower walks, not fewer ones. For conversations that last longer, not less often. For finding joy in the bird song outside your window, or the sunlight across your table, or the voice of a loved one on the other end of the phone. The shape of your life may look different now, but different doesn't mean less meaningful. Less busy doesn't mean less valuable. So if your world feels smaller lately, let it become more intentional. Let it be rich with presence instead of filled with distraction. And remember, your life still holds space for laughter, connection, and purpose. It simply asks that you notice it more deliberately. This isn't a closing chapter, it's a quieter one. And sometimes the softest pages carry the greatest truth. Let's move to what may be the most personal shift of all. One of the most disorienting changes after 80 isn't visible in the mirror. It's in the inconsistency, the way your body stops being predictable and starts being puzzling. You wake up one morning and feel clear, grounded, even energized. You stretch, move, pour your coffee, and think, today will be a good day. And then, without warning, the next morning, everything feels off. Your legs are shaky. Your hands don't grip the mug the way they did yesterday. You feel foggy, unsure on your feet, not in pain exactly, just unfamiliar in your own skin. This is the strange reality. Your body, once your most loyal companion, begins to send mixed signals. And it's not just about weakness, it's about surprise. You bend down to tie your shoe and realize it takes twice as long to get back up. You reach for a glass and feel a tremble in your fingers. You step outside and a wave of fatigue hits you halfway down the driveway. You ask yourself, what changed? I was fine yesterday, but there's no clear answer. And that's what makes it so unsettling. You've lived in this body for a lifetime. You've trusted it, relied on it. It held you through decades of work, parenting, dancing, caregiving, loss, laughter. It was your anchor, and now it feels like shifting sand. But here's the part no one says out loud. This unpredictability isn't just physical, it reaches your confidence. You begin to pause before leaving the house, not because you can't, but because you're unsure what your body might do next. And that hesitation, that self-doubt, can feel more limiting than the physical changes themselves. But let me remind you, your body may no longer be consistent, but your wisdom absolutely is. And now more than ever, that wisdom becomes your compass. You start to listen more closely. You notice what foods lift your energy and which ones leave you drained. You build in breaks without guilt. You stretch not to perform, but to care. You hydrate not out of routine, but out of reverence. You start to understand that strength in your 80s doesn't look like what it used to. It's not about power, it's about partnership. It's not about control, it's about cooperation. And yes, there will still be days that catch you off guard, but now you meet them with grace. Because you've learned that adaptability is a form of strength and gentleness with yourself is not a concession, it's a skill. You're not losing control, you're learning a new way of navigating, with patience, with honesty, and with quiet courage. So if your body has become unpredictable lately, take heart. You're still here, still trying, still learning. And even in its shifts and changes, your body is not your enemy, it's your teacher now. Let's take one more step forward together. So here we are. We've gently walked through 5 of the most honest, often unspoken truths about life after 80. Not the medical charts, not the pamphlets in the waiting room, but the real shifts, the ones you feel in your bones, in your heart, in the spaces between conversations. We've talked about how the world grows quieter and how relationships change. We've named the ache of becoming less visible and the surprise of how unpredictable your body can feel. And maybe along the way, you heard something that made you pause, something that made you think, yes, that's me. If so, let me tell you something simple and true. That recognition isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Because there's something powerful that happens when we put words to what we've quietly carried. It brings light to what has been left in shadow. It brings connection to what once felt isolating. And it reminds you, you are not alone. These changes we've spoken of, they don't have to define you, but acknowledging them allows you to respond with clarity and intention. And that is what transforms this season of life from something you get through into something you can truly live inside of. So now I gently ask, which of these 5 realities resonated with you most? Was it the thinning of your circle, the slow surprise of your health, the moments when you felt unseen, unheard? Take a moment and leave a comment below, not just for me, but for someone else who might be reading and quietly nodding, realizing they're not the only one. And if you're willing, share one thing you're going to carry forward from today's video. Maybe it's a reminder to be gentler with yourself. Maybe it's the courage to reach out to someone you've grown distant from. Maybe it's the permission to rest, truly rest, without guilt. Whatever it is, know that your voice matters. It may not echo across the internet like the loudest voices do, but for someone reading, maybe someone who feels exactly like you, your words could be a thread of comfort. If this video gave you something, a little peace, a little clarity, or simply the feeling of being seen, please consider liking, subscribing, and turning on notifications. Your support helps us keep creating this space, a place of honesty, of hope, of quiet strength for a community that deserves to be heard. Because aging isn't about fading away, it's about coming into focus. Thank you for spending your time here with me. I hope we meet again in the next video. Until then, stay steady, stay present, stay true.